Your rectum does not run straight down, and it never has. Near the very end of it there is a bend, a deliberate kink held in place by a muscle you have never once told what to do. That muscle has one job. It keeps the bend shut so that nothing leaves your body without your permission, and it is very good at its job. It is so good at it that it is still half doing the job at the exact moment you are sitting on the toilet trying to let go. So every ordinary trip to the bathroom is a quiet argument between two parts of you. One part is pushing the door open. Another part never quite got the message that it is time. Two things that should not both be true are both true at once. The same muscle that keeps you clean and continent all day is the muscle you have to fight in order to empty. And here is the part that turns a piece of anatomy into a design flaw. Whether that muscle lets go all the way or stays half clenched and makes you push is decided by something you would never think to blame. The angle of your hips, the height of the seat underneath you. Sit at a right angle, the way every toilet in your house quietly asks you to, and the muscle stays partly on. Raise your knees higher than your hips, and it finally, fully releases. There is a study out of Israel that measured exactly how big that difference is, and the number is not small. Hold on to that. First, the muscle and two bodies. Picture two bodies. They are not two real people, and nobody should imagine that they are. They are a modeled comparison, built from population averages and from what the research on posture and the bowel actually shows, so that we can hold one variable still and change only the other. Everything about these two is set to be identical, on purpose. Same age, both are 64. Same colon, the same length, the same number of feet of it coiled in the same way. They eat the same breakfast. They drink the same amount of water across the day, down to the glass. They take the same number of steps. Their fiber is identical, gram for gram. Their stress is the same, their sleep is the same, the bacteria they started life with are the same. If you scan them side by side, you could not tell them apart. We hold all of that still for a reason. In a real life, you could never separate the seat from the food, from the stress from the fiber, and so the seat gets lost in the noise and blamed on everything else. The whole point of two modeled bodies is to silence the noise. Whatever difference appears between them cannot be diet, because the diet is identical. It cannot be age, or fiber, or water. There is only one thing left it can be. There is one difference, and only one. When each of them sits down to have a bowel movement, one of them sits on a standard toilet at a right angle, feet flat on the floor, the way almost every adult in America does. The other one rests both feet on a low stool, so that the knees ride up higher than the hips. That is the whole experiment. Not diet, not fiber, not water, not willpower. One of them sits square, and one of them tips the knees up. We are going to follow both of them, and watch a difference that starts as nothing at all turn into two different bodies. To understand why a footstool could possibly matter, you have to meet the muscle that decides everything here. It is called the puborectalis. It is shaped like a sling, or a loop, and it wraps around the back of the rectum right where the rectum turns into the anal canal. One end of it anchors to the pubic bone at the front. It runs back, hooks around the tube, and pulls it forward. That forward pull is what creates the bend. The bend has a name too, the anorectal angle. At rest, sitting, or standing, that angle sits at roughly 90 degrees. Think of a kink in a garden hose. When the hose is bent hard, the water cannot get through, no matter how high you turn the tap. The puborectalis keeps your bowel kinked like that, on purpose, all day and all night, so that you can walk around, laugh, cough, lift a bag of groceries and lose nothing. It is the reason continence is the default and not a thing you have to concentrate on. But that same bend, so useful the rest of the time, is exactly what is in the way when you want to go. For stool to pass cleanly, that muscle has to let go, and the angle has to open up. And this is the trap of the modern seat. When you sit at a right angle, the puborectalis does not fully release. It stays partly contracted. The kink softens a little, but it does not straighten. So you are trying to push a soft solid through a passage that is still bent, and the only tool you have left is pressure. You bear down, you hold your breath, you push against a door that is still leaning shut. There is a reflex underneath all of this, and it is worth seeing once. When the rectum fills, stretch sensors in its wall, fire, and send up the signal you know as the urge. If the moment is right, a coordinated thing happens. The rectum squeezes down, the inner sphincter opens on its own, and the puborectalis and the outer sphincter are supposed to release together, so the angle opens and the sphincter stands aside at the same instant. But if the moment is wrong, if you are in a meeting or on a bus, you can override the whole sequence by doing one thing: you grip. The puborectalis pulls harder, the angle becomes more acute, more sharply bent, and the stool is pushed back up into the reservoir above until the urge fades. That is the muscle's real character. Its resting state is a grip, and its instinct under pressure is to grip harder. It does not hand you a fully open door and wait. You have to earn the opening, and posture is most of how you earn it. Now let us start the clock on our two bodies. Week 1. On the surface, nothing. Both of them go. Both of them finish. If you asked either one whether anything was wrong, both would say no. But there is already a small gap that neither of them notices. The one sitting square takes longer and pushes harder on almost every visit. The one with the knees up sits down, the angle opens, and it is mostly over before the other one has really begun. A minute of difference here, 90 seconds there, nothing you would ever count. A tiny tax, paid quietly, several times a week. Watch how invisible that is. Neither body is constipated. Neither one would ever mention this to a doctor. If you handed both of them the same questionnaire, they would tick the same boxes. The entire difference in week 1 lives in seconds and in effort, in the quiet physical fact that one of them is working against a bent passage and one of them is not. This is the reason the problem hides for so long. It does not announce itself, it accrues. Month 1. The gap is still small, but now it has a shape. The body sitting square has begun to develop a habit without meaning to. Because emptying is never quite complete at a right angle, a little is often left behind. The rectum does not feel fully empty, so the message to go comes back sooner. This body finds itself returning to the bathroom more often, sitting longer, sometimes going back within the hour with the nagging sense that it is not done. The knees-up body does not have that feeling. It empties, it stands up, it forgets about it. One of them thinks about the bathroom, the other one does not. Let me stop here and name the feeling, because you may know it. If you have ever stood up from the toilet and felt that you were not quite finished, if you have sat back down within the hour, not because anything new arrived, but because something still felt left behind. If you have ever pushed and held your breath and felt your face go warm and thought that this is simply how it is, that feeling is not a personal failing, and it is not your diet betraying you. Some of what you are describing is a muscle that never got the angle it needed to fully let go. Back to the two bodies. Because now we move from a feeling into the tissue itself. Year 1, the difference is no longer only about time and comfort, it has started to leave marks. Every time the square-sitting body bears down against that partly closed door, the pressure has to go somewhere, and a lot of it lands on the delicate cushions of blood vessels that line the very end of the canal. These cushions are normal. Everyone has them, but repeated straining swells them, stretches the tissue that holds them in place, and over a year of small daily pushes, they begin to enlarge and to complain. This is the second body system, and it is a structural one. The knees-up body, opening the angle and letting gravity and a relaxed muscle do most of the work, simply asks far less of those vessels. Same colon, same everything. One of them is straining its plumbing a little, thousands of times, and one of them is not. And there is a cost to the pushing itself, separate from where the pressure lands. To force stool through a partly closed angle, the square-sitting body has to raise the pressure inside the abdomen, and the usual way to do that is to hold the breath and bear down hard. That is the warm face. That is the held breath and the pounding you feel behind your eyes for a second when you really work at it. A brief, sharp rise in internal pressure, over and over, is not something a younger body notices, and not something an older one should shrug off. The knees-up body barely raises that pressure at all, because it barely needs to push. Two bodies, the same age, and one of them spikes its own pressure a few thousand times across the years, while the other one mostly lets go and lets gravity finish the job. Notice what is happening. We did not change what these bodies eat. We changed the angle of a single muscle, a few times a week, and a year later the consequence has moved out of the muscle and into the blood vessels 3 inches away. That is the first handoff, from the mechanical to the structural. There is a second symptom worth naming here, and it lives in a different system than the first. If you have noticed that going has started to take real effort, if you brace and grip the edge and work at it, if there is straining where there did not used to be, or the sense that you are forcing something that should not need forcing, if you have seen the aftermath of that pressure and been alarmed by it, those are not separate mysteries. They sit at the end of the same chain. The strain and the swelling and the not quite empty feeling are 3 faces of one problem, which is a passage that is still bent when you are asking it to be straight. Before we follow the 2 bodies out to 10 years, one short detour, because the obvious question by now is simple. If the seated toilet is such a poor fit for this muscle, why on earth is every toilet built this way? The answer has nothing to do with the body at all. For almost all of human history, in almost every part of the world, people emptied their bowels in a deep squat, knees up near the chest, which is the exact posture that opens the angle all the way. The raised seat is recent, and it did not come from anatomy. It came from furniture and from pipes. When indoor plumbing arrived, the toilet was modeled on the one piece of household equipment everyone already understood, which was the chair. A chair is built for a comfortable, dignified, upright sit at roughly the height of your knee, so that an adult can lower onto it and rise from it with ease. That height, around 16 inches off the floor, is a wonderful height for a chair. Nobody in that whole design story ever measured the anorectal angle. The seat was set by the shape of a chair and the depth of a drain, and the muscle at the end of your colon was never once consulted. And this is not an exotic posture we are reaching back for. Watch a small child who has not yet been taught to use a toilet, and they will drop straight into a deep squat without a thought, knees high, heels down, spine long. That is the factory setting. The squat is not a technique, and it is not a fashion. It is the posture the human body falls into the moment it is left alone with the job, in every culture, on every continent, for as far back as we can look. The seat is the novelty here. The squat is the original. The height of the thing you sit on every single morning was optimized for your knees, not for your digestion. The fixture is a compromise around plumbing wearing the shape of a chair, and your bowel has been quietly paying for the disguise ever since. Now, 10 years. This is where the model has to slow down and be honest with you, and I will be, in a moment. But follow the direction of it first. The square-sitting body has now bordered on a decade of small daily strain. The enlarged vessels are no longer an occasional flare but a recurring fact of life. There is a second structural cost that has crept in, which is that regularly forcing pressure down onto the pelvic floor, over years, tends to stretch and weaken the very sling of muscle we started with. So the floor that should stay firm begins to sag, and the emptying gets a little worse, which invites a little more pushing, which is its own slow loop. And there is a third body system in play now, one you cannot see or feel, which is microbial. When emptying is chronically incomplete, material sits longer in the last stretch of the colon than it was meant to. Transit slows, and the community of bacteria that lives down there responds to how long things linger and how completely the colon clears. The knees-up body, emptying cleanly and quickly across the same 10 years, has kept that whole downstream environment moving and turning over. 2 bodies that began the decade identical do not end it identical. Sit with that for a moment. Nothing dramatic happened on any single day. There was no injury, no illness, no bad decision. There was only a small mechanical mismatch, a muscle asked to open at an angle where it will only partly open, repeated so many thousands of times that the body slowly reorganized itself around the strain. That is how most of what we call getting older in the bowel actually arrives. Not as an event, as a slope, so gentle you never feel yourself sliding down it. So where, exactly, did they split? Not the colon. It was the same colon the entire time. Not the food, not the fiber, not the water, not the discipline. They split at the angle of one muscle, set by the position of the hips, repeated a few thousand times a year for 10 years. That is the divergence point. Everything downstream of it, the vessels, the pelvic floor, the microbes, the time spent and the effort paid, all of it traces back to that one small mechanical fact repeated until it became structural. Here is the mechanism in full, because you have earned the whole picture. When your hips are at a right angle, seated on a standard toilet, the puborectalis stays partly contracted and holds the anorectal angle near 90 degrees. The passage is bent. To move stool through a bend, you supply the missing force yourself by raising the pressure inside your abdomen. That is straining, and straining is the body improvising around a door that will not fully open. When you raise your knees above your hips, you change the geometry the muscle is working in. The deep hip flexion of a squat, or of a footstool that mimics one, lets the puborectalis lengthen and release far more completely. The sling stops pulling the tube forward. The kink straightens. The anorectal angle opens well past 90, toward 100 degrees and beyond, and now the rectum and the canal below it line up closer to a straight drop. Gravity is suddenly on your side, the passage is clear, and the amount of pushing the situation demands falls away. There is one more piece of this that explains why almost nobody catches the problem on their own. The kink only really resists firm, formed stool. When stool is loose or watery, it slips around the bend without much trouble, so on the days your diet keeps things soft, the seated angle feels fine, and you conclude the seat was never the issue. The bend does its obstructing quietly, on exactly the days a healthy fiber-fed bowel produces a good firm stool, which is to say on the days it should be easiest. So the design flaw is not only hidden by how gradually it accrues, it is hidden by the fact that it only shows its hand some of the time. Now the number I told you to hold on to. In 2003, in the journal Digestive Diseases and Sciences, a physician named Dov Sikirov ran a small, clean study. He took 28 healthy volunteers, 14 men and 14 women, ranging in age from 17 to 66, all with normal bowel habits. He had each of them time, with a digital timer, how long it took to reach the sensation of a complete, satisfying emptying across 6 consecutive bowel movements in 3 positions. Sitting on a standard toilet at about 16 inches, sitting on a lower toilet at about 12 inches, and squatting. The averages tell the whole story. On the standard, right-angle seat, satisfactory emptying took around 130 seconds, well over 2 minutes. On the lower seat, around 114 seconds. Squatting, it dropped to about 51 seconds, under a minute. And it was not only faster. Every single volunteer reported that the effort, the straining, fell sharply when they squatted, compared with either seated position. Not some of them, all of them, same people, same bodies, same week. The only thing that changed was the angle of the hips, and the work of emptying more than halved. That is the cleanest evidence we have that this is real, and it is worth saying plainly what it is and what it is not. Which of the two bodies are you? You can tell without any equipment. Notice how long you actually sit. Notice whether you push, whether you hold your breath and bear down, or whether it simply happens. Notice whether you stand up feeling finished, or whether there is a small unfinished feeling that pulls you back later. Notice, once, what your knees are doing while you sit. Almost certainly they are level with your hips or lower, which is the square sitting body, which is nearly everyone reading this. And notice one more thing, gently. Notice whether the bathroom has quietly become a place you bring your phone, somewhere you settle in for 10 or 15 minutes because you have learned, without ever deciding to, that it takes a while. That settling in is not normal biology. It is a work around your body invented for a passage that will not open cleanly, and you built the habit so slowly that you never once saw it form. None of that is a diagnosis. It is just you, reading your own mechanics for the first time. Now the honesty, because this channel does not sell you a straight line where the research only gives a curve. What is well established is the anatomy. The puborectalis muscle is real. Its sling shape is real. The anorectal angle is real. And the fact that deep hip flexion opens that angle while a right angle keeps it partly closed is settled physiology you will find in any serious text. What Sikirov measured, the faster emptying and the lower reported strain when squatting, is a real finding, and it points clearly in one direction. But it was one study, of 28 people, timing and rating themselves. Treat the exact seconds as a strong signal, not as a law of nature, and understand that the effect will be larger for some bodies than others. What is plausible but not proven is the 10-year story I just walked you through. The link between a lifetime of straining and swollen anal cushions has good mechanical logic and real association behind it, but nobody has run a study that takes hundreds of people, randomly assigns half of them a footstool for a decade, and counts the difference. So the long arc of those two bodies is honest modeled inference from mechanism, not a measured result. And the microbial part is the softest of all. That incomplete emptying and slow transit can shift the community of bacteria in the lower colon is reasonable and has some support. But the clean causal chain from seat height to microbiome is not established, and I am not going to pretend it is. And this matters for a few people especially. If your bowel habits have changed suddenly, if you see blood, if you are losing weight without trying, none of that is a footstool problem, and all of it is a reason to see a doctor promptly. Because the posture question is the wrong question when the body is signaling something else. If you already have significant hemorrhoids, a rectal prolapse, a diagnosed pelvic floor disorder, or recent surgery in that area, get individual guidance before you change anything, because your mechanics are not the average mechanics this model is built from. And if you have a heart condition, or you have been told to avoid straining, the breath-holding push of a right-angle bowel movement is not a small thing, and the posture that lets you stop pushing is worth raising with your own doctor rather than taking from a video. None of what follows is a treatment, and none of it is aimed at any disease. It is simply the input this muscle was built to receive, handed back to a body that stopped receiving it the day the chair replaced the squat. So, tonight, put a low stool in front of the toilet, the kind that lifts your knees clearly above your hips. 7 to 9 inches of height is the range most people find, does it? Rest both feet on it flat before you begin. Let your chest tip forward toward your thighs, just slightly, so your torso and legs close toward each other. Then do less, not more. Do not hold your breath and force. Let the open angle and gravity carry most of the load, the way they were always meant to. If it has not happened within a few minutes, stand up and come back later rather than sitting and straining. And if you are unsteady on your feet, choose a stool wide and stable enough that stepping onto it is never the risky part of the morning. That is the whole protocol. Raise the knees, drop the effort, and give one small muscle the angle it has been waiting your entire adult life to get.